So this is the board I'm going to use as my auxiliary fence. Now you may have noticed that the Shopsmith auxiliary fence is pretty high. They made it tall so that they could add a couple feather boards to it. I never liked that. I was kind of forced to use that in academies, and they were, in my opinion, they were always in the way. And any safety device that's in the way is not a practical safety device. As far as a tall fence is concerned, it's great. If you're joining wide boards, it's just wonderful. The problem with it is if you're using it, the jointer, with that fence extension and the table saw together for cross-cutting long boards, that fence can be in the way. So to determine exactly what height this needs to be, if you're going to be using it together with the table saw, you kind of have to have a sense of how tall is the table in relation to this. Now, I'm rarely going to be cutting through a 4x4, but if I was, I would need to have this fence at about 4.5 inches tall in order to clear it. Now, one nice thing about this fence is I can use it actually as a little bit of an extension table just to support stock. As long as I make it the right height for when I'm cutting, let's say 3/4 inch, 19 millimeter or so stock. So with the blade exposed above the table about an inch, let's get a measurement of the table from the floor. We're going to make sure that we're unplugged at this point. I've got my Incra gauge set at 1 inch. I've mentioned before how this is the most used tool in my shop. I actually now have a couple of these, and I keep them in both shops. I can use this thing as a height gauge. So let's raise the table up and expose just 1 inch of blade, and we can rotate that around so that a tooth is at the top. And we'll bring that till you see it start to tip back, and then I'll raise it till everything is standing perfectly straight up. That's a 1 inch depth of cut. So from there, that puts my saw table just about 43 inches off the floor. Right now, I am at about 42 1/4. So really, this fence is a great height. So right now, we're looking at a piece of stock that's 7 inches tall. Now, at this point, let's talk about the realities of our jointers. If you're going to be jointing stock with the fence tilted, which I rarely do, with carbide tip blades today, we get really a beautiful cut. If I have to joint a mitered cut, I can tilt the fence. And when you do, you tilt the fence inward so that your stock is trapped between the fence and the bed of the jointer. But let's say that I wanted to do that. Then I would take this board and I would cut a 45-degree bevel or chamfer on the edge. I usually just leave this square. So if I wind up needing to joint an angle, say put a chamfer on something, then I just take the extension off. I typically don't need it in those applications. If you think that you might, go ahead and rip an angle on the edge of your stock. What I don't like about it is then you have 3/4 of an inch of fence that is now gone. Really the way it works out, you can't put pressure against that. The feather guard is putting pressure against that beveled surface on the fence. I don't like to do that. Another thing we can do with our fence at this point is we can take 3/8 of an inch of stock from the edge of the infeed table. We would measure up 3/8 of an inch, draw a line, and cut that off. I don't do that on a table saw. I would do it on a bandsaw. And so you make a cut that ends in a radius. And that way, if I am ever going to rabbet with this and my jointer bed is going to be 3/8 of an inch lower than the outfeed side, I can accommodate that. How often do I do that? Not very often anymore. I already mentioned I don't do a lot of rabbeting on the jointer anymore, but let's just go ahead and do this, all right? So where my fence is going to be is more or less flush with the back edge of the fence. Again, we're still unplugged here. I'm going to mark the edge of my infeed table, and then we'll use our Incra gauge to measure 3/8 of an inch. In fact, we'll go just a hair wider than 3/8 of an inch. And then we'll just draw that along the edge here till we get to the end. And that can end with a radius like so. And we'll just cut that out on the bandsaw. On the Shopsmith fence, you've got a hole that's already bored here, as well as one just beyond the cutter head. So we can take our fence, put it up here, line it up here flush with the back edge, which is where we initially positioned it. And you can see that with the bed now lowered 3/8 of an inch, or almost 3/8 of an inch, we still have a little bit of a gap between the fence and the outfeed table. So we'll take a marker or a pencil and mark through the holes in the fence into the back of our extension fence. Now let's see what we got. All right, I don't know if you remember when we were playing around with talking about how to make a tool holder for your lathe chisels. I was doing it on here. Anyway, there's our hole location. There's our hole location. Now I'm going to drill through from this side because this is the side that's marked. I'll drill a 1/4 inch hole because we're going to use a 1/4 inch carriage bolt. But the head of the carriage bolt would then sit proud on this side, and that's not good. But once we have that hole established, we can then drill from this face with a Forstner bit and get that head countersunk. So to the drill press. So this is pretty tight here, and because I use really long bolts, I'm having to back the carriage bolt in and set my Bittner nut up and underneath that fence lip here, and now I can tighten that up, no problem. If you like, you can put a wrench on that. What's important is you want to be sure that the carriage bolt head is properly seated. And if you have to, you can give that a tap with a hammer to get the seat. And then every now and again, as you use this, you want to double check to make sure that those nuts are tight. So now imagine you've got some wider stock. Before, where we were working against a very short fence, it felt like I was tipping over. Now I've got tons and tons of height here to support my stock. Also, you might be thinking, well, you just lost yourself 3/4 of an inch of jointer capacity. Actually, no, the jointer was designed to have a fence on it. That's why they put the holes in the fence. I can take this fence, slide it all the way towards the end of the rail. I'm not even at the end yet, but I'm beyond the blades on the far side. So go and do likewise and make it a great week.